You know, it's kind of a shame that I'm a little too lazy to get my actual katana down from the sword rack. But anyways, Katana Zero. This is another game. I did not play this one on stream. Ultimately, I decided to do some other stuff. I played this one on my own time. But yeah, I had a pretty decent time with it. I enjoyed this, so let's talk about it. Katana Zero is a pixel art 2D. You may have noticed a trend with the stuff that I play and review. It's pretty much all 2D and a lot of it's pixel art. Pickle art? Ugh. It's pixel art because that is, one of the trends in gaming. If you can't afford to do lusciously hand-drawn animation, pixel art's a good secondary to that. But pretty much all the stuff I review is 2D because fully 3D makes me motion sick. I couldn't even play the Stanley Parable. I got sick after a half hour. Ugh. Anyways, so like a lot of what I play, this is 2D. This is an action platformer that honestly, the simplest description that I could give it, which will make total sense if you've played the other game I'm about to reference, and none if you haven't, but it is a side-scrolling platformer version of Hotline Miami. And what it means by that is it is violent in an over-the-top fashion. It has one-hit kills for both you and most of the enemies. But at every failure, you can restart it pretty much immediately. So that, yeah, you're going to die a lot, but at the same time, like, that's the game. You're going to try something and you're going to get killed. And you're like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try doing it a different way. And there's a slowdown mechanic that is not so generous that you can just spam it through the whole thing, but works really well for when you find yourself in circumstances like, okay, it is possible to survive this, but between all these guys I got to take down, all right, slow it down, knock that bullet out of the air with my sword, slice this guy, backflip over this guy, slice him, throw a bottle at the guy before he can get a second shot off at me. And you kind of need slow motion for that. But the fun thing is, once you beat an area, you can watch it back played at normal speed and really get a sense of what a badass you were. And that's just fun. That's something that I think anything that is put in like bite-sized chunks like this that allows for slowdown mechanics, let us see it how it looked in real time. Because like when you're slowing down, you don't feel as much of a badass because, you've made it easier by slowing it down. But you watch it back in real time, you're like, yeah, I'm cool. Story is the... Okay, so you play a character. It's in a bit of a semi-futuristic dystopian world. You play a character who has a big sword, has a katana, and you have a therapist who keeps sending you out on missions to kill people and is also injecting you with drugs that it's not entirely clear what they are, and they probably aren't what he says they are. And it's okay as far as the story goes. It's honestly too much story for the kind of game this is. Because it's the kind of game that like gets you on a bit of an adrenaline rush, working through, and you're like, yeah, let's keep going. And then gameplay is gone for like 5 minutes while it gets you through the I was gonna say somewhat convoluted, somewhat obscured story that like I'm not really that invested. Like literally the only thing I had any investment in was your character's budding friendship with a child from a neighboring apartment. Pretty much everything else going on in this, I'm not saying there shouldn't have been any story, but the amount of time sunk into it seems to presume a level of investment in a lot of these things that I just didn't have. And it's a shame because like the world building and how it's actually working and what everybody's place in all this is pretty good. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It just sinks more time into it than a game this much about the frenetic action kind of needs. And that's a little bit of a drag down. And like I dig stories in games and I like a good story, and it's not even a bad story. It's just I didn't care as much as the game did. It's not that I didn't care at all. It's just, I'd be feeling like I'm on a roll, and then suddenly control would be taken away from me so that we can go through an extended cutscene with this villain or this villain who they're working for, or this extended thing with the therapist, which feels like a repeat of the last two times I've had a scene with the therapist. And I just want to get back to I just want to get back to throwing vases at goons and then slashing at them from the floor below, because that's really fun. And it's the kind of cathartic fun that needs only a limited amount of context. And again, I think the story they came up with is probably the right story to do for a game like this. They just sunk too much energy into it. It's one of those cases where, like, I feel like they went to all the trouble to come up with backgrounds and how the world got this way and what everybody's deal is, and then they just didn't have the self-restraint to not pour all of it into the game itself. Not realizing that with a game like this, maybe having it as little background details that, like, oh, that feels like it hints at a really bigger world. That's kind of cool. Yeah, like, I want to be doing the yeah, not scraping through lore. It's not super long, but again, just for how often you're going to replay certain bits, for how many times you will be cut down, it still get a decent length out of it. There is some Easter egg stuff. There's some alternate play modes, alternate weapons, things you can unlock later on. But honestly, I think the main playthrough is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, because you just the escalating difficulty of circumstances as they start to wheel out, enemies who have shields, so you have to jump over them and hit them from behind at the same time as a guy with a shotgun and a dude with a knife are coming for you. So it's that, and it's trying to parse your way and survive that intensity. And also it's the size of each section, because, like, there's the greater levels, but they're broken up into smaller sections. The size of the sections is actually very well balanced, because, like, a way to mess this up is if you make the sections that your game is saved after you beat that section. But if you make the sections too big, then what can happen is you can, like, perfectly nail all this stuff at the front end, but then stuff at the back end of the section just keeps taking you out. One, because you don't have as much experience dealing with it, because you have had to survive all the other stuff to even get there. And two, it's just really frustrating to feel like you mastered something and then just get smacked in the back of the head and sent back to the start. That was one of the problems that I actually had with Shovel Knight. Boy, reviewed that ages ago, it seems now. Like, I enjoyed that game a lot, but I hated the spikes. I absolutely detested the spikes and the fact that they were an instant kill, because there would be sections, these stretches between checkpoints where I was, dealing with all these enemies and going through all this stuff, and I'd be, like, within, almost within sight of the next checkpoint and brush a spike and die. And that's not fun. It's not even challenging. It's just infuriating. And this game avoids that for the most part by having its sections, I would say, pretty much just the right size. There was only, like, maybe one or two where I felt like, oh, geez, I'm still not done with this section, and there's this last bit that keeps getting me. That only happened, like, maybe twice, maybe only once. It's been long enough that I played it, that I'm recording this from when I finished it, that I can't remember how many times it happened, but it was not many. And for a game like this, that easily could have been the complete, breaks the entire appeal of it, because the flow is what you want. And it's one thing to start over and over and over again to beat the front end of an area, because, like, you're working your way through and you're like, oh, okay, I've got this and I've got this, and then you feel like you mastered that, and then you get to the second half of the same section and suddenly you feel like you're starting all over again, but you don't have a checkpoint in between. No, that's not good. But like I said, that does not happen much, and it could have happened a lot. So they balance that really well, and that's really kind of a key thing for a game like this. Do be aware, despite being pixel violent, it is very, very violent. both in narrative and honestly in the level of gore. It is stylized, pixelated, unrealistic gore, but there's a lot of it there. So if that's an issue for you, definitely avoid it. But if this kind of high-speed action is your bag, or if you played Hotline Miami and enjoyed that and want to try it from a different perspective, yeah, I'd say give this a shot. Katana Zero, what are your thoughts on it? Have you played it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills, allows me to do this as my living. Even if you can't support me that way, like, share, subscribe are also big helps, but I don't want to put too much pressure on you because, we take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break. End credits, that means I need to shout out my top Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zupin Lutfula, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Linda Walters, Emu Delkey, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Renabi Likes the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Shay Lagourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you so much for your support. You can get your name in the credits too by checking out the rewards on the Patreon. You only tried to eat my earring once this time. That's much better.